how temperature affects nail products. Very important for you to know. We're going to jump into this topic right now on the Biz Talk.
You know what? You just named the title. Have no idea what we're talking about.
We are talking about Jorge and his milkshake right behind the camera that nobody can see, and how it's annoying. Guys, I'm not joking. This is literally, he's looking at us, and I'm envious.
Dude,
I will admit. I want a milkshake.
It's not even a big milkshake. And he's been drinking that thing for like, what, an hour?
17 hours straight.
17 hours
Yeah,
straight.
He got it yesterday. It's been stuck to his palm.
Milk at this point.
It's completely melted. Drink the damn milkshake, buddy. Okay,
I don't
let's get
think
through
there's
this.
anything in there. I think he's just air.
He's just putting it in our face. That's all it is. I get it. All right. Topic important. This is something we have been discussing on our live streams, but we need this to be part of our library. I don't know if we've done this topic before, but temperature in nail products is a big one. Mm-hmm. You have to understand that relationship. And this is number one, so that when the temperature changes, you have an understanding of like, oh, okay, this is kind of what's going on.
Yeah, because it can be really frustrating when you roll up to your salon and your product is not responding the way you expect it to respond.
Absolutely. And then what are some things that you can do? We're going to give you some safe tips, very easy things that you can do that will keep your products workability like consistent. You know what I mean? So you don't have these too dramatic shifts of changes in the consistency and like, oh my God, it's not moving, or it's moving too fast, or what the hell is going on? So all these things we're going to get into, but just let's start from the top down, Trace. So like generally speaking, how does temperature affect nail products? I mean, we've got hot, we've got when it's cold. Right now it's cold.
It's cold.
So how does this affecting nail products currently?
So it's the flip. It's the reversies.
Oh my God.
For acrylic and gel. So acrylic, when it's cold, gets very runny. It doesn't set up as fast. I tend to use less liquid because it just runs. And then gel, on the flip,
slows down.
It's thick. You're like, what is this semi-cured? Is there something going on here? It's just like no movement, no self-leveling property to it.
Right.
And and then the flipsies, when it gets hot, acrylic sets up like cement, and then gel is very fluid and it's running everywhere.
So just to clarify, so again, acrylic in the winter right now when it's cold, if you don't have temperature control, right, and it's where you are at, it is chilly inside the salon or wherever your workplace is, the acrylic takes longer to dry, right? And
everything's slow and it just flows more. It's like
because it's not hard. It takes longer for it to harden and cure. So the movement seems like it's going on forever. Right. So that runniness that you talked about.
Yeah. It's like using way too much liquid. All this, if you ever do that with acrylic, it's like, but you're not using too much liquid now. You're using the same amount as you usually do, but it's acting like that.
Correct. And then just to go over this again, and we're going to get into details of how to deal with it and things that you can do and how to offset. Gel gets thicker. Right. So whether that's
self-leveling.
Right, exactly. So it's like in a bottle, it's going to get a little thicker, or even in a pot if you're scooping it or using traditional hard gels, or in a tube or whatever it is, it's going to get thicker, which means it's going to be moving slower, and the consistency, obviously, it's going to feel like what happened, because this gel typically moves fast, but now the consistency feels different. So consistency. But that is true, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So we're going to break this down step by step here. So let's start with acrylic first.
Okay.
You've got an acrylic in the wintertime right now that is runny. It takes forever for it to set up. What are some things that you can do to offset that and to make it set up quicker?
So the number one piece of advice I can give for acrylic gel, any of your products, off the bat is keep your room a consistent temperature. We tend to kick down, turn off the heater, or during the winter, because we don't want to heat the place while we're not there.
Of course.
but it just causes problems, you know. And I know it costs a little bit more, but how much is your frustration worth?
Right.
So that's my number one advice is like, don't drop it all the way down to where your product's getting cold. Past that, I tend to switch to more speed products during the winter.
For acrylic.
Yeah, for acrylic. And then also I tend to use less liquid. Or I may, if you ever watch us tap the liquid, you brush on the table to drain the liquid a little bit, I tend to do that more.
Got it. So you release more liquid out of the brush.
Yep.
And that way it will, in essence, you're doing some techniques to offset that slow setup time.
Correct.
And to speed things up.
Yep.
Okay. What about gel? Now, we've had some people call in and say, oh, my gel seems thicker. And it's because it is going to seem thicker because of the temperature. And right now, if we're delivering products across the country and it's inside of a truck, there is no insulation.
Nope.
And so products are being exposed to quite a bit of cold. So when they're delivered, this is going to be the case.
Yeah.
What are some things that they can do? Obviously, the number one you've already mentioned, which is try to keep it in, temperature controlled if you can.
Yeah. So what I recommend is like, if you notice your product, if it's coming off a UPS truck right now in the States, it's cold. And even if it's not cold where you are, I liken it to like pulling out a frozen turkey, setting it in the middle of your kitchen that's 80 degrees and going, why isn't it thawed in an hour? It takes a while. It doesn't just because you're outside temperature. So, I used to just like, maybe I would like insulate it in some blankets or something like, not blanket, towels. Yeah, towels that I had laying around, try to, get it warmer, not just set it out. Or, if you're not going to use it for a couple of days, because I always tried to have stock of my product. Usually what I was receiving, I wasn't going to be using right away. Then just putting it away. And I kept my salon at a consistent temperature. Eventually, it would get warm again. Right. But if it like right away, sit on it. No, just kidding. But
like the chicken,
it takes some time. It takes time because you can't just defrost something just like that.
Right. Correct. I like anything with insulation.
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to take time, a little bit of time. But it's a nice, safe way to get your products to like room temperature. You know what I mean? Like room temperature being in that like 70s, right? In that area, so to speak. But there's so many things that you can put it. I mean, there's coolers and because they insulate or anything that, you know what I mean? You want to keep your food or drinks hot or cold.
Yeah.
There's insulators.
Well, and that's a great piece of advice. If you do, like, let's say I'm working in Habib's salon and he's like, I don't care. I drop this down to 50 degrees at night. Then, something like not a cooler, but an insulated thing where it keeps it the temperature that you're putting it in. Right. That would be huge. That would make a big difference. And then maybe put towels in there too, so it helps.
And that way, like, you've got the temperature that's consistent throughout the day. Maybe the salon keeps the temperature on, 70. And then at night, it's like, yo, I'm turning this off. It's going to get in the 40s in here. I would put it in some type of insulated situation. I would. Idea. Yeah. And then that way overnight it stays relatively, insulated from the cold.
Yep.
And then in the morning they turn it back on. It should be pretty good. Obviously it's still going to be impacted. And that's why utilizing those techniques that you were talking about is so important.
Yep.
But for something like gel, it really, really should, it really should work.
Yep.
It really should work. Okay. What about, would that kind of go for nail polish as well? I mean, do you see like nail polish get a little thicker or it's just not as much?
It's not that because you have the beads in it. It kind of.
Oh, you can shake it up and break it up.
And you can kind of make it fluid again or whatever.
Yeah, you can generate some heat in there.
A problem too much. Gel polish, yes.
Right.
But even gel polish, I just think because it's a thinner consistency in general, not so much of a problem. But yeah, never really had an issue there. It's mostly my acrylics and my hard gels.
Right. Okay. So now you roll into spring, probably not so much of an issue for most people because the temperature is consistent all around the country for the most part, or the world for the most part. You get into summer and it starts to heat up. And this is where you see the opposite happen. Acrylics, it's like you lay it down. You're like, cool, I'm using my speed powders and my speed setup powders, from Young Nails. This is awesome in the wintertime. And then, okay, in the spring, it's fine. But then the summertime, you're like, yo, it's like drying like that.
It's like, touche,
Boosh.
no movement. Like,
Yes.
oh, crap. Got to work really fast. Yeah. It always takes you by surprise. I don't know why. Of many years that I've done it, it's just like what's going on? Something's wrong. But then you realize it's warm, and even here, like we'll start getting it'll start getting warm while we're filming, and it's like the product starts to set up faster and faster and faster on you. So a couple things we can flip. We can go back to core powder.
Core powders, totally.
Right, just slower set, or we use a little more liquid. We don't drain so much, so you start to work with the consistency, with the room temperature, and learn how to maneuver.
Right.
You can, that's the one thing I even say with core and speed powder, you can get them to react the exact same way depending on the amount of liquid you decide to use with it.
Right. Now, and I love that. And that's something that I have learned from you guys. We've done those acrylic videos where we work on consistency and picking up beads and controlling the amount of liquid in the brush by how much I'm tapping, or if I am draining and how many seconds I'm draining for before putting it on the nail, depending on what type of bead I'm going for. Those are all things that you can just do because of the temperature change.
Yeah.
Right. Now, what about on the gel side? This one I'm kind of interested. I mean, you would think that if gel is, if it's getting warm, it's going to be thinner, it's going to move quicker. Mm-hmm. Is that a problem?
It is.
Okay.
Work in Redding, California.
How hot did it get? It got like
118, 120 sometimes. Yeah.
Dude.
And at that point, I mean, nothing like Southern California. You guys have the worst air conditioning units. Like
you're part of Southern California now too.
Yeah, that is true. I'm like, what is wrong with you guys? Barely get hot and it's dying in here. But it's like you guys weren't set that, because you don't need to.
Yeah.
Reading, the air conditionings are very good units.
Yeah.
And it's still, when it gets that hot,
it's hard, right?
It's hard to keep. That's why you do not turn off your air conditioning at night in the salon.
Oh, you'd be done.
You're done. If you walk in and it's warm, you're done. And you're never catching up. So, couple things. Again, I love the insulated idea.
Yep.
Try to keep it a consistent temperature. Try to keep your salon consistent. And then on the flip side, you may have to work thinner layers.
Yeah.
Instead of, I'm used to being able to do all 5 nails. Now I can only do 1 or 2, freeze it while I work on the others. So you learn to...
You have to adjust. You have to make those adjustments.
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing, obviously, like I'm imagining a situation where I have like a builder gel and it's like a nice medium consistency, a thickness that in the heat, it gets really thin.
Yeah.
So that right there, I was going to ask you about that, but you kind of answered the question, which is, look, maybe you were doing 3-4 nails at a time. You now maybe 1 and 1 or 2 and 2. You have to make adjustments because of the temperature.
And remember, we have different viscosities. Same with acrylic. We have core and speed. Well, okay, so in the winter, maybe I switch to more doing my building with flex.
Flex, right, because it's thinner.
Now it's more of a medium consistency versus the thinner. And maybe in the summer, I'm working more with clear sculptor than builder because it's reacting differently.
That's perfect. I didn't even think about that. Yeah. It's the same thing. We have different thicknesses. Utilize those thicknesses for the different temperature changes. Like clear sculpture would be great in the summer, right? Because it's a pretty thick gel.
It's thick gel. Okay, it's thinner now. It's acting more like a build gel.
Right. Cool. So maybe you do a couple nails instead of all 5, like you said.
Yeah, and it doesn't cost you any time because you're always working on the other hand.
You just got to switch.
And I forgot one thing that I used to do in Reading, because Reading also got very cold.
Yes.
And when your client's hands are cold, even if your product is at the room, it can actually affect how it sets. It can affect your nails like all of a sudden are popping off.
That's
because
right.
it's not. So I used to, when my clients walk in, I had hand warmers that they could stick their hands in while I
So
pull everything out. So
smart.
it gets their hands up to the room temperature too. Helped a lot.
Yeah, that's huge. Of course, if their nail plate is cold and you drop the product on, that's absolutely going to affect the product.
Yeah.
So interesting.
I totally spaced it. But yeah, I used to do that in writing.
Nice. And then finally, I just wanted to say, like, as a general rule of thumb for you guys to understand, extreme heat can actually like make the products go bad faster. Any extreme heat when they're exposed, like I'm sure some of you have had the experience, I know we have, where I've left polish in my car and parked it and it got really hot. It just,
Yeah.
like it's all over the place.
That happened to me. Red.
Red. Your favorite color.
Had to be red.
Dude, it's so like, and typically colder temperatures more like preserves, it'll affect that consistency and that workability, but it's not going to do much harm. Obviously, if you go too low, anything, you don't want it to go too cold, that can affect it. But just generally speaking, that is something very important to remember and keep in mind. So having said that, we hope that you take these tips and tricks and knowledge and information, and that way you're not frustrated, right? And like driving yourself crazy as to why.
Know what's happening.
You know what's happening. Make the adjustments so that you don't want to absolutely bang your head against the wall. Like, why are my nail products not working? This is why temperature does have an effect on it. And again, dude, this is why nails, it's not easy, man. Like, not only do you, like, you're dealing with, like, doing nails is hard to begin with. But now you have to deal with seasonal and temperature changes and how that affects the product and the chemistry. Nails is hard, man.
It's like your little chemist.
Your little chemist, exactly. So I hope that helps. And Tracy, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time on the Biz Talk.
Subscribe the channel now. Subscribe the channel now. Subscribe to the channel now. Subscribe to the channel